Hello friends, parliamentary form of democracy is one of the strongest form of democracy. When you compare it with the presidential form of democracy, you will find out that there are elements in the parliamentary form of democracy which makes it more stronger. And UPSC has asked a beautiful question in 2024 on parliamentary form of democracy. Now, welcome to this series of UPSC Mains PYQ, one PYQ a day series, and today is the day of Polity, and we are going to see the question which I was referring to, and this has appeared in 2024, which is a 10 marker, and you have to write the answer in 150 words. Just read this question and try to appreciate the beauty which UPSC produces year after year. The growth of cabinet system. So they are asking about the cabinet system. This is an important word. Has practically resulted in the marginalization of the parliamentary supremacy of the country. Now, and they have said elucidate. So to give few examples to prove why this statement is correct. Now, you should understand what parliamentary form of democracy is before we get into this answer. Now, when you see this parliamentary form, this is actually about responsible government. Now, in this responsible government, the executive is responsible to the legislature. In one or the other way, the existence of the executive depends upon its strength in the legislature. भाई parliament होती है देश के अंदर, हाँ, इस parliament के हिस्से क्या क्या होते हैं? President is the one, then comes the Lok Sabha or the House of People. Then we also have a Rajya Sabha. And the executive is dependent on this Lok Sabha. Executive is responsible to this Lok Sabha. The majority, whichever party wins the election and forms the majority in the Lok Sabha, forms the government. And after forming the government, a council of ministers is appointed. Okay. Now, this council of ministers should not be more than 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha. Now, this particular provision came in from the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act, and it was very much needed also. Out of this 15% council of ministers, there are three kind of important ministers. One is the cabinet minister, ministers of the cabinet rank, then the people who are the minister of state, and also assistant ministers. Okay, but this cabinet minister, the minister of the rank of the cabinet, they are this strongest body in the parliamentary form of government. Okay, they are the one who are making all kind of policies, rules and regulations, because these ministers are of superior rank. Only the cabinet ministers, the ministers responsible for very important portfolios such as home minister, finance minister, defense minister, all these kind of industry minister, agriculture minister, they are the one who forms the cabinet, and the head of this cabinet is the prime minister. So all the rules, regulations, all the laws and legislations which are made in the country, of course it is made in a very democratic process. It has to go to the parliament, and there is an opposition who also opposes and criticizes the policies of the government, the rules and the legislations and the laws, everything. But despite of being there in the parliament, the opposition's role has decreased over a period of time. And over a period of time, what we have seen that parliamentary supremacy is marginalized, and this cabinet is becoming more and more powerful. I hope you have understood the whole idea of why this question has been asked. What was the idea when democracy was established in India and when the constitution was established in India? At that point in time, it was seen with the great ideals that the laws are going to go into the parliament and it will be debated. The opposition is going to come up and it is going to criticize the government, which is very much necessary. Debates are very much necessary, and that is going to happen in the parliament. But with time, what has happened? It is seen that this cabinet has become a super powerful body in the parliamentary form of government. That does not happen in the presidential form of government. Why? Because there is no responsible government. There is separation of power. The executive is separate from the legislature, and that is the reason why such a thing cannot happen in the presidential form, but in parliamentary form this thing has happened, it has resulted, and we are going to prove it in some time. See, if you see the laws, rules, regulations which are passed and made in the parliament comes from the ministers, and they are approved by the cabinet. Very rarely a private member's bill is passed in the parliament. Very rarely, and I don't think it has happened like more than 1 or 2 times in our history, entire history. Usually the private member bill is defeated, and only the bill which is passed by the parliament is the one which is coming from some or the other minister. And that is the reason this body, cabinet, is one of the most important and practically the most powerful body in the parliamentary form of government. So laws which are made. Then the next thing, there are committees in the parliament which are there to scrutinize a bill. They check the bill provision by provision for the deeper scrutiny, and these committees are of permanent nature and of ad hoc nature also. But usually bills are not sent to these committees, and if it is sent to these committees, then their recommendations are not accepted. Then again it points out that the cabinet is the most important body and the most powerful body, because they are not even listening to the committees, which even consists of people from the opposition. Okay, then comes the financial power. The power of finance with the cabinet is huge. They make funds, they allocate money and grants and everything. And if it has to be passed through the parliament and needs a parliamentary approval, that can be done, especially when the government is in majority. It is not forming any coalition government. When there is no coalition government and when there is absolute majority in the Lok Sabha, at that point in time the cabinet system becomes even more stronger, and this cabinet takes a brutal force when the government, the established government, the majority party also has majority in the Rajya Sabha. Then it is almost impossible to defeat the agenda of the government. The government can implement any policy, any scheme, any law in any way, shape or form it wants. Okay. Why? Because it has the majority. It has the majority in Lok Sabha, it has the majority in Rajya Sabha. And here we have the cabinet, the crown jewel we can say, which holds all the power. No law or rule or regulation can be made without it being passed through this cabinet. The role of the Minister of State or the assistant ministers are very tiny in front of this cabinet. It does not consist of a very big body. It consists of 5 to 7 or maybe 10 members. So think about what has happened to the parliamentary supremacy because of the powerful cabinet. Then comes the ordinance making power, ordinance making power. Again, who makes the ordinance? It is the government. When the parliament is not functioning and a bill or a law is needed for emergency or immediate purposes, an ordinance can be passed. That power has been given to the government. And the majority party which has the government and has formed the government, they have a council of minister and the cabinet. They are the one responsible to pass the ordinance. And once the ordinance is passed, it has to be, although it has to go to the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha parliament, and in the similar fashion, the whole procedure as you pass a law, that ordinance again has to be passed by the parliament. But sometimes it also gets repromulgated, which afterwards was considered illegal by the Supreme Court. But for about a good amount of time, that ordinance becomes a major force in the country. if the cabinet and the government in power makes it a law. And think about a situation when ordinance comes to power and the same political party is in majority in Lok Sabha. What happens? The ordinance also becomes a law. Why? Because it has to go to the parliament and whole procedure has to be followed. And what happens in the procedure? The majority, the party which has the number is going to win. So this ordinance making power makes cabinet even more powerful. And then comes the last point, whip. This whip power, one of the major power where the party had or the important ministers in the cabinet and whatever they say becomes the most important, because when it comes to voting on a particular bill, everybody has to vote on the party line, or else they can be disqualified on the basis of anti-defection. To avoid all that, they have to vote on the party line, and that is the reason why the independent thinking or vision of a parliamentarian is given less importance compared to what the cabinet is deciding. I hope you are getting why whip is one of the reason why cabinet is becoming one of the most powerful body and undermining or marginalizing the parliamentary supremacy. What impact all these things have on the parliamentary supremacy? The parliament has to be a body where all the rules, laws, legislations, even for that matter, amendments and other things have to be debated. And when this body is subdued, when this body does not get the necessary relevance or importance because of the increasing power of the cabinet, then the supremacy is definitely marginalized. So that is what you are going to write in your answer. Of course, the answer has to be very much organized. So let us just organize into 2-3 important things. If you see this, there has to be an introduction. Now in this introduction, you should introduce the answer with the parliamentary form of democracy. Parliamentary form of democracy, and then you have to show how in this parliamentary form of democracy the executive is responsible to the legislature. Okay, you have to understand the very much basis or the foundation of this answer which lies in the parliamentary form of democracy. Whichever party which forms the government after getting the majority in the Lok Sabha, that government forms a council of minister to run the government, and out of this council of minister, which is only 15% or less of the total strength of Lok Sabha, comes the cabinet. Okay, and this cabinet is the most important and powerful body in a parliamentary form of democracy. After writing the introduction, you write the body, and in the body you have to actually prove what we have proved here, that you have to elucidate writing these, that when it comes to the law making functions or the functions of the committee, financial functions, ordinance making power or the whip, this body called the cabinet holds supremacy over the parliamentary system. I hope you are getting it. That is what you have to write in the body, and then finally comes the conclusion. In one or the other way, what do you really think is suffering? Few members of the cabinet are making all the laws or getting importance in all the laws of this country. What happens in the parliamentary form of government? Executive is to implement the law, but the laws are made by the parliament. But here, the same people who are sitting in the executive are also making the laws in the parliament. So whatever executive wants is made in the parliament, thanks to the strength the majority party has in the parliament. And with that, what is happening? The democracy, which is upholded by the supremacy of parliament, is decreasing decade after decade. So that is how you have to conclude your answer. Thank you very much for joining me in this series, and we will meet in the next video with the next subject, with the next previous year question. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.